Why is criticism of Israel, the country, automatically viewed as anti-Semitic? You seem really in touch with social issues, so first thing I want to say is not to be afraid of these conversations. If people immediately write you off as something negative, that's their bias and their fault. I'm not Christian, nor do I have many Christian friends, so I can't speak on the faith side of discussion. But I do have a rudimentary understanding of the political side of it. Basically, the US and other Western nations have connections with Israel, and it's just easy to write off any criticism of these political decisions as anti-Semitic. It immediately shuts down opposition. Anyone with an actual understanding of world politics and social issues understands that Israel does not equal Judaism. In fact, many Jewish people don't support what Israel is doing. If people call you anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel, they're either uninformed or have ulterior motives. It's not. Anyone who reacts in such a way to criticism of Israel is not acting in good faith. It's not. As long as you're specific with your criticism. Criticize the policy, not the people. Criticize the governing, not the country. No, because Israelis are currently criticizing the Israeli government's behavior at the moment. As a Jew who criticizes the Israeli government, the reason THJS happens is because a lot of the time it's a thinly veiled mask for actual anti-Semitism. I've seen so much anti-Semitism spewed under the guise of being only anti-Israel. Now, it's not like there's inherently something anti-Semitic about the criticism, but a lot of the time it isn't Jew that, unfortunately. Try being a Muslim criticizing Israel on Palestine. I think it's a distinction between criticizing Israel, which is absolutely fine, and implying or stating it shouldn't exist, which could be interpreted as Jews don't deserve a country, which would then open the door to someone making a claim you're treating a group of people differently due to their race, religion. Well, you got your answer in these comments. Because too many people are painting Jewish people as these powerful puppet masters or Palestinians as pea-sized brain war-hungry animals. People's biases and flat-out bigotry get in the way too much to look at the issue without turning into this. I'm Jewish and this is my view. The answer is, it depends. Jewish people do not deserve a right to self-determination, but I believe other peoples do have this right. Anti-Semitic. Jewish people do not deserve a right to self-determination, and nor do any other people. I do not believe in nations or borders. Not anti-Semitic. Israel does bad things. Not anti-Semitic. Israel does bad things and so do other countries, but I only choose to criticize Israel in all circumstances. Ambiguous and possible covert anti-Semitism, or possibly not. It's not. I criticize the Israeli government all the time and no one has ever called me anti-Semitic. Because almost all criticism of Israel is one-sided, devoid of context and history, and failing to apply the same moral standard to either Palestine, Egypt, or other Arab counties. There's a bit of a reality that Israel is between a rock and a hard place. There is not an action they could take that would solve the problem, and no critique of Israel ever acknowledges this. The world wants a two-state solution. Israel granted the Gaza Strip autonomy and self-governance in 2006, and it has used that autonomy simply to attack Israel over and over. You can say the Gaza mortar attacks don't kill many people, but that's a deflection. It's indicative of the mentality and prioritization failures of Palestine. It shows Israel does not have a good faith partner it can work with. Egypt also blockaded Gaza for the same reasons Israel does. An honest historical look at what happened in the state's formation is that Zionism was fringe movement. Then Holocaust survivors and former Ottoman Jews migrated in the area legally after brutal persecution on multiple continents. Other Arab states ejected more Jews than there were Palestinians displaced by the Independence War. But concentration of Jews didn't fit in with Nasser's pan-Arabism vision of a new ethno-state. Covering the Middle East, it was never about stolen land. All the conflicts from 1920 to 1980 was pure Arab intolerance of Jews. Only after pan-Arabism faded did it turn to a localized conflict. It was 30 years of terror by Palestine trying to extract concessions from Israel in negotiations. Look, I'm 40. Grew up in New England. I'm not Jewish. I vividly remember bombings in Tel Aviv regularly making the news in the 90s. My parents remember the Arab-Israeli wars. We now have a new generation whom hasn't finished reading their history books, and whom doesn't see the constant low-level violence from Gaza because the rocket attacks don't make the news anymore. They see images of periodic Israel incursion and that's it. The new Gen Z far-left politics tends to bucket people as oppressors or oppressed, and assume the former is malicious and the later virtuous. Nowhere more than this conflict is that view stupid and simplistic. The reality is you have a first world, democratic, egalitarian society doing the best it can to manage a conflict with a partner whose population is uneducated and led by zealots. The mutual distrust is understandably super high. The conflict needs third-party boots on the ground to improve, not just never-ending concessions from Israel. It's probably more accurate to label criticism of Israel as more uneducated and naive than intentionally anti-Semitic in the U.S. But rather notably, Palestine's strategy is simply to wage a PR war against Israel, and liberal Westerners are gobbling it up and repeating a series of Palestinian arguments and revisionist history that are deeply rooted in anti-Semitism. Since I can weather down votes, I'll pipe in. I can think of a couple of reasons. First, while many, such as "it seems," are genuine in their objectivity, much of the criticism comes from people who turn out to be actual anti-Semites. So the honest objectors get lumped in. Second, the criticism of Israel is never constructive. I've yet to see a suggestion for how Israel can resolve this disaster while maintaining its Jewish identity, not to mention its existence. Mostly because a fair number of people question whether the Jewish people should have their own country, while accepting that Arabs, Irish, Icelandic, whatever should of course have their own countries. Another argument is that Israel isn't doing things any differently than the US or a Western European country would do, faced with the same situation. So holding Israel to a different standard, maybe because they're Jewish, critical of a government is different than critical of if a country should exist. Not automatically, but many people do have a certain trait which makes anti-Semitism the most likely case. They only criticize Israel. There are an endless number of states, regions, regional warlords, etc., which commit the exact same crimes as Israel does. Occupation of new land, questionable treatment of minorities, and so on. Yet I have not once in my life seen any of those legitimate Israel critics that post about that state on a weekly basis once complain about any other state or region. So why do these people feel the need to condemn one state while giving every other state a free pass? What is the difference of that state? Maybe that it is the only Jewish state in the world? Palestine got its name from the Roman Empire after they took Israel from the Jews. They named it Palestine to insult the Jews. It derives from their biblical enemy, the Philistines, which means uncultured ones. The Palestinian national identity didn't exist prior to the 1960s. No one considered themselves as Palestinian until very recently. It was just Arabs living in Palestine. Jews started buying land from those Arabs, and the British Mandate sought to give Jews a piece of land as they had none. Europe had just committed a mass genocide against them, and the Arab world had systematically expelled nearly all of their Jewish populations from their countries. The Jews had nowhere to go. Many were denied immigration rights to America, and would not stay in Europe. So what would you have had them do? Float from country to country that didn't want them and be mistreated and murdered? The British Mandate was flawed in implementation, but gave this disenfranchised people a chance at returning to their homeland. Even if it hadn't been their homeland for some centuries, it historically was theirs. There was nowhere else for them to go. We can't change the British Mandate, but all we see is bashing on Israel. 2 weeks ago, a Palestinian terrorist attack targeted and killed a 6- and 8-year-old. Other attacks in the last month target elderly leaving synagogues, children, families. Israel is a deeply flawed country and can have aggressive tactics to snuff out terrorism. But their back is against the wall. Palestinian national TV has kids shows encouraging children to murder Jews and throw rocks at them. What would you have the Jews do? Anyone who puts a one-sided blame upon the state of Israel and calls for its destruction is unquestionably anti-Semitic. Criticism of Israel is fine, but it often fails to address the context that has the Jews in that position in the first place. There is a difference between not support Israel government's decisions, being full anti-Zionist, not thinking they deserve to have their own country, and hating Jews. It's okay to not support Israel government policies, but it's not okay to be anti-Zionist. It shouldn't be. Just be careful not to conflate Israel with Jewish people as a whole. Some people will still get mad, but if they are acting in good faith, they will at least be able to get the nuance. Nobody acting in good faith will call all criticism of Israel. Criticism of Israeli policy is absolutely necessary. See protests happening right now. Criticism of Israel as a country or suggesting that bad policies means that Israel should not exist is an anti-Semitic. Often I find that the most people saying that all Israeli criticism is discarded as anti-Semitism are the ones applying a double standard to the only Jewish country in the world. We have gone too far on political correctness so as not to upset absolutely anybody. As a society, it's absolutely ridiculous, dumbing down humanity to meet the needs of uneducated people who might get upset. You can't complain about aspects of any race of people anymore without being called racist. Whatever happened to intelligent rhetoric and debate as a way to possibly elevate ideas?
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. TooAfraidToAsk is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.